I've seen pictures you've taken of Keith Richards, of John Lennon, of the Beatles, of the Oak Ridge Boys, of Johnny Cash, and I'm sure I'm missing 1,000 others just for sake of being quick. But you've had like a really storied career as a music photographer. I want to go into all of it, but I kind of want to flash back to the 60s when you were in England. How did you get involved with the Beatles?
I started taking photographs when I was 7 years old, and I bought a camera at the local chemist. That's where they sold them. It was a pharmacy store in America,
Right.
and I saw this camera in the window. It was a Brownie 127. It turned out, and I went in there and asked how much it was. It was £1 and 1 shilling, and I didn't have that sort of money. And I only had pocket money. So I said, I want that camera. And they said, well, there'll be another one. I said, no. So I created a layaway. Basically, I said, I want that one.
Yeah.
So they put it in the case behind the counter, in the wooden case and glass. And every week I'd go in and give them my pocket money until I got this camera. I was just interested in the family and documentation and the scene. I lived on the South Coast. And there was only 12 exposures on there. And I didn't have much money. So 12 exposures had to last a long, long time, for weeks, until you get it processed and printed. And they had these little prints called end prints. So fast forward to the middle 60s, like 66, 60. So my father was in the men's clothing trade, and he was making bespoke clothes. So my mother had this idea as a modernist that he should get publicity and that he should like get photographs done by the pop photographer of the day. It turned out to be Dezo Hoffman, who shot the Beatles. And at the time, and I was a big Beatle fan. So Dezo Hoffman came down and he photographed. It came down from London, I'd say, to the southeast coast, and photographed me and my brothers posing in boys' suits. And it was kind of boring. Until one day, and frustrating, because it was our one day off from school, and we were boarding school, and it was like, I really want to be home, not doing this.
Right.
And so one Sunday afternoon, we're listening to a radio show called Pick of the Pops on the radio. They count down from the top 20 to number one, and it was always like the Beatles were on there, like twice or three times, and he's asking us to jump in the back garden, and me and my brothers and my friend John Burroughs was there, and we're kind of listening to the radio off in the corner, and he says, last week I was photographing the Beatles in Liverpool, and they jumped. I said, "Jump, boys!" And so we jumped, and he got these photographs that he shot with a Rolleiflex, black and white, with Tri-X in it, I think it was, or whatever, or Ilford, might have been Ilford film in those days, of us jumping in the air. I really hated school, and I got a job basically with Dezo Hoffman as his assistant. It came up for December of 1967. I was in the middle of exams at school, and I was told by a master to report to the headmaster's study that evening, and that I was leaving school. And the headmaster explained to me, and he said, you really should finish your exams and go through school. You'll fail in life otherwise. And I said, sir, this is the best school I've ever been to. I hate school. Goodbye. So I went to work with Dezo Hoffman on a Monday morning on December 4th, 1967. I started work in Gerrard Street, London. And the third floor, there was an elevator, lift, or stone staircase. And went up there. I was so excited. I was so excited to start. And the first day I was there, I was glazing print. It was a big Kodak print dryer, and he'd printed 850 of his whole plate reproduction photographs of someone. I don't remember who the artist is now, and I was like really excited to do that. But within a few days, we were out shooting, and I was his assistant, and learning the ropes. And we were at a TV studio, and I'd shoot 2 or 3 frames, and he'd go like, shoot a whole roll. And I go like, what? I've never shot that much.
Yeah.
And the second week I was there, he he did and he was working for the Record Mirror. It was a pop magazine of the day. He was the photography department for them, and he had to do a front cover. He was asked to do a front cover for Christmas of Jimi Hendrix. So I was assistant. I was second assistant on the Jimi Hendrix session. The second week I was at work,
Wow.
and painted the backdrop, and I was a second assistant because the first assistant, Peter, was there. He overlapped. He was leaving, and so he was there for a few weeks to show me the ropes. And we painted the background together, and I assisted Dezo on the shoot. It was an excellent photography session for an older man that he was. He really did a modern session. It was really good, and so after that, I was started to shoot. I mean, he sent me out. It was post-Beatle days. The Beatles had just kind of broken up. They had done Magical Mystery Tour, of which Dezo and his old cronies would say, the boys have ruined themselves, they're making their own films, and it's not. They shouldn't be doing that. They should be doing a professional studio like Hard Day's Night or something like that. And they didn't. So I was there at the end of the Beatles. Basically, the Beatles had already gone by the time I started work, because I always wanted to work to be an assistant around the Beatles.
Yeah.
But I missed that. But in 1968, I went to a press reception in the King's Road for the opening of Apple Tailoring.
Oh, wow.
I arrive. I'm 17 years old. I got cameras and the bag on my shoulder, and I go there, and there's a table, and George Harrison sitting at this table with Patty, his wife at the time, and a couple of other people perched on the end of on the edge of the chair, and I had a wide angle, and I'm leaning across the table, and I'm doing something like that. Excuse me, off camera here, but I'll do it literally with a camera like this. So I've got a wide angle thing, and I'm leaning across the table, looking through the camera, and I'm taking some pictures of George, and then all of a sudden I hear this voice to my left. Hey, get out of my bloody chair. Unmistakable John Lennon voice, and so George goes, looks at him and goes like, hey, steady on, John. He's okay. And John was with, and of course I gave him his chair,
Yeah.
and because I knew it was somebody's chair, and of course I gave him the chair, and he was with a date, a Japanese woman, and I thought, I'm not going to take a picture of them because he's a married man, musician, and it's just not cool, It's like, I'll leave it. A few minutes later, it was like, John and George are going down. They're the only two Beatles who arrived for this thing. Went down into the basement of this club to be photographed, for a press call, basically. And I took a picture on the way down, which is a really cool picture that's up on my website, alanmesser.com. If anyone wants to see it or buy it, even, it's a really kind of popular print of John. I love it, actually. And then
we'll edit it in so people can see it too.
So I'm taking pictures of John and George down there, posing for the press. And then John looks at me and he says, would you take some pictures of me and my mates? And I said, sure. So he took a liking to me. He liked me, and because I hadn't gurmed him, And so I took a picture of him that turned out to be the piece photograph that you could put up on the screen too, and this one that you guys can see now. And I made a silk screen of it too later on. So I think trust is a very important thing in photography, in when you're working with people. And there's an example of trust. Like, they trusted me. They didn't know who I was, and they trusted me because of my attitude. And when an artist trusts you, you get the pictures. And if it's a thing like that, another situation that happened was with George Harrison. Actually, in 1974, I was at the Albert Hall at a press call again for a Ravi Shankar concert in the afternoon, and there were about 200 photographers there. There was loads of them.
Yeah.
And I'm not one who likes to flash. I like to take available light photographs, and I don't really like flash. I've used flash, direct flash, but I'm not that type of photographer. I'd rather find the light. I get there, and there's one little tiny work light on the stage, the stage lights weren't on. It was nothing. There was just one work light over the top, and there was just no light, basically,
Yeah.
And so I said to the other, cheekily, I just said to the other photographers, when they come out, let's get them in the light. You can get your pictures, your flash pictures, and I can get my picture too. Well, they come up on the stage, the side of the stage, in the wings, and to meet the press, and everyone just flocks around them, like, hey, over here, George, over here, Ravi, tick, tick, click,
Yeah.
dark. And I thought, oh, these guys are like, being, it's a little bit, even though they're professional, it's a bit offensive, it's a bit too much, it's like.
It's like paparazzi.
Paparazzi stuff, just too quick, and they were used to it, but it was just too much, and so I couldn't take a picture anyway because they were in the dark, and I waited. So when that subsided and they walk over to the kind of the middle of the stage where they needed to be anyway, I introduced myself. I said, my name's Alan. I'm with the Record Mirror. I don't have a flash. Can I take a picture of the two of you, please? In the light. And I was kind of, the two of you was a little bit like the two of us in the Beatles song.
Yeah.
A little parody there in my mind, 'cause I'm a big Beatle fan. And George said, oh yeah, thank you very much. And so we started taking this picture. A throng comes around us, a circle of photographers comes around, and then everyone's clicking and banging, and then George points at one of them and he goes like, hey, you're taking star photo poster pictures of me. And the photographer whimpered, no, I'm not. And he said, yes, you are. You got a 135 millimeter lens on there. I know photography.
I see. He has the 135, which zooms in further. So he's like, you're just getting a close up of me.
Of just George.
Got it.
This isn't the George thing. This is George sponsoring, putting on a show for Ravi Shankar.
Right. This
is what it's about. The Ravi Shankar, Music from India concert, not about George Harrison, ex-Beatle. We're being thrown out, basically. Someone had apparently asked George a Beatle question, and the publicist has said, I'm sorry, we have to end this. So I didn't really get my pictures. I didn't really get much. And tail between my legs, started crossing the auditorium to go back to my brown camera bag and pack my cameras up. All of a sudden, there's this unmistakable voice behind me. Would you shoot the show for me? I turn around, and it's fucking George Harrison right in my face. I mean, inches from my face. And I said, yes, can I have full backstage access and all that? And he says, yeah. I said, funny you should ask me, because I work with, and he just turned around and walked away. Whereas he didn't want to know about Dezo Hoffman, he didn't want to know any of that stuff. It was like, but he picked me out of a crowd, I mean, when I said that to John back in '68, he spoofed on it and gave me a Dezo Hoffman type of pose, sticking his hand out into the camera like that, which was a Dezo thing. And John they knew Dezo very well, and I mean, they brought up with him, in the early Beatle days.
He didn't want to hear about Dezo. He just picked you out and bailed. And so I presume you went to the show. Did it all go according to plan? How was that shoot?
Yeah, I mean, I photographed it. It's an interesting one because I photographed the concert. And I got great photographs. I made a set of prints at Dezo Hoffman's studio. I mean, I made a prints in the darkroom, 11 by 14s. Dezo stamped them with his stamp when they came out. He and John Lennon had a falling out and whatever. So anyway, he didn't like me working with the Beatles. He was like, how dare you, sort of thing, and whatever.
Which is funny because you're in a weird way, you're following in his footsteps.
In a way, yes. But anyway, he stamps these pictures, these prints, with his stamp on the back. And I suppose I thought that George might be a little
ticked off about it.
No, and I thought he might actually kind of enjoy it, But what happened was years later, and I dropped these pictures off of these Dark Horse records. I made an envelope and stuff. Years later, I realized these pictures are there and his prints are there, and they're doing, I think, in the Living in the Material World movie. And I tried to get in contact with his wife, Olivia, and it wasn't until an album came out. Unfortunately, it was too late. There was a collaborations album, it was called, between him and Ravi Shankar. And my pictures are used. There's like 4 pages of my pictures inside the booklet, credited to Dezo Hoffman. Yeah.
Which makes sense because the stamp was on the back.
And so I wrote to her and said, this is wrong. These are my photographs. And I told her the story, and she said, I don't disbelieve you, but, you have to legally change this, and, I don't have the ability to do that, and have the money to hire lawyers and stuff to do that stuff. But legally, they're mine, actually.
Wow.
And
is that something that's still in print today, or is that...
Yeah, I mean, these pictures are still there. I have the prints. I made the prints, and I got stuff that I've done from there. I don't have the original film, and it's really sad because photographers, we all do. Every artist, every writer, every musician, we live on our credits.
Right.
You live, your credit lines. That's why I'm saying I'm detailed on stuff. I like to credit people. I like to credit myself where credit's due. And so these pictures have gone out, and who knows how much business I've missed and opportunities I've missed because nobody knew they were mine, and they were not taken by a photographer who was not even there.
Right.
And I don't like that. So
wow.
But my name is on a lot of photographs.
I was just going to say that.
I think let's get past that story. And the fact is, my photograph. My name is on a lot of photographs for over 5 decades,
It won't come up for a few more decades, but one thing I probably should have mentioned in the beginning is that you built the room we're sitting in.
Yeah, yeah. We're sitting in the room right now in the basement of my. I used to own this house. It's on South Street here, and we're sitting in the basement that I dug. One side it was my house and upstairs, and then the other side was my studio. And I had a dark room in the back, and a room in the back. I converted it into a dark room, and I was shooting most days. I was shooting during the 80s. I was shooting pretty much a session a day, and then processing the film. I may have sent the film out. I don't remember I don't think I processed the film myself. I may have sent it out, but then I would print it. I'd have a dark room, and I spent all night in the dark room sometimes, until it got too much. It got to be way too much, But it was very exciting times. I shot Robert Duvall up there, for the session in 1984. The Oak Ridge Boys, you mentioned. I've did several sessions with them. I did a Christmas album with them where we built a set up in the studio.
Yeah.
I did Reba McEntire country album. I've shot George Jones in there. A lot of people. I mean, I used to be one of the most prolific Nashville photographers.
Yeah, I mean, it fucking sounds like it. I know you also did Tanya Tucker up there.
Oh, yeah.
Dwight Yoakam.
Oh, Dwight Yoakam was shot there, yes, yeah.
Waylon and Jesse Coulter,
yeah.
You told me about. They had something with a pink phone.
Yeah, Jesse was actually, I rented this, I was leaving the house. I went through a divorce, and I was like getting like a country music song. You lose your house and you lose your dog and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I got my dog back, by the way. But I moved to a warehouse downtown. But as I was moving and I was going out of here, someone who'd worked with me before was Kenny Rogers, was shooting a book of his own photographs. And so he borrowed my studio. I let him borrow my studio. And at one point, one of the people he had in here, a couple he had in here was Waylon and Jesse. And they were in my kitchen, and my kitchen was went through the back. You know, it's like I had a back door to my studio. So in this case, I had it opened up because I didn't have to divide off my residential to my studio part. And she sees this pink Princess phone in there, and then she says, "Wow, where did I get one of those?" And I went, "You can have this."
Nice.
So I gave her the pink Princess phone, and apparently they put it in their pool house in Brentwood, and so I could just imagine big old Hoss Waylon Jennings sitting on a pink Princess phone talking to people in his pool house.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy all the different people you had upstairs and everywhere else. But so how did you? Well, and I know you also did a lot with Johnny Cash, which I want to go into because I'm not completely clear on all of that. But we're back, like going back to the 60s. How did you wind up going from shooting George Harrison and Ravi Shankar at this concert and being under Dezo all the way to Nashville?
I was photographing TV shows. I mean, I did a show. I was a self-appointed photographer for a music show called Yoga Whistle Test. Did like 105, 110 shows like that. It was very exciting. I used to photograph country music people when they came into London. I got involved with a record company, ABC Anchor Records in London, and they had people like Jimmy Buffett who would come over. And the photographs that came out of America were terrible. The American photographs of the time were terrible, especially the Nashville photographs. They were really proverbial, people standing against trees, and they just really weren't very good. Weren't good quality, and they weren't good thoughts behind them. And the British press was not using it, you know, so they were missing. So I would get to photograph these people for the British press, so the record company could get some PR. You know, like I got to photograph Steely Dan one day. You know, they wouldn't pose for the record company for something, but they would for a magazine feature. And so I went over there on the guise of doing this magazine feature for them, and they were great. I loved them. I was a Steely Dan fan, and it's like, yeah, I spent a few minutes in a hotel room with them, got those pictures. So country music people were starting to get into my life during the time in the 70s in England. And there was a country music festival that was being held in April at Wembley called the International Country Music Festival. I didn't really get into the music. I wasn't really into that, but I went, you know, it's like photography.
Yeah.
And you know, I remember hearing or being told, like once there was like this guy was up on the stage and, you know, sound check. Merle Haggard, it turned out to be, and he was up there with his band, and someone said, "Go up on the stage and photograph him. This guy's great." Well, he was great. I mean, he was just amazing. I mean, I was on the stage during sound check, and the guys, I think, playing saxophone at one point and singing, and so I photographed him up on the stage, and didn't think much of it. A few years later, that became his greatest hits of the 80s, photographed, shot in 78, of course. And I got to work with
So they made that the cover?
I ended up doing a silk screen on that. So
Wow.
Every photograph I took somewhere down along the past had a life of its own as we went on, you know. And so I started to get involved with country music people there, photographing them. Loretta Lynn came over. I photographed Loretta Lynn in London at Wembley with her husband Mooney. You know, like, you know, on stage, and I was in the dressing room with her, and I got to photograph a lot of these country people, and I didn't really think much of it.
But what was like the reception to country music in London in the 70s? Like, was that a kind of a novelty for?
Yeah, I think it was a kind of novelty. I mean, I think country music was, like, you know, you got this strange set of people who, you know, who thought they were like, you know, British cowboys. You know, you know, they'll dress up in, you know, in hats and boots and stuff. But there's a following to it. And like one day I was at memorable moment at a one of those Wembley concerts. I think it was 77 or 76. I don't remember exactly the date, but and you can put a picture up of this because I've got some pictures of this moment. But there was a band rehearsing up on stage, a group, and a manager. I was on the floor of this big auditorium, Wembley Stadium, and this manager guy comes over to me and he says, hands me his business card and says, "Take some pictures of this band and send me the pictures." Turned out to be the Oak Ridge Boys.
Oh, wow.
His name was Jim Halsey, who was the manager of the Oak Ridge Boys. I didn't know, but he just gave me his card and sent me the pictures. So I took a few pictures of them, rehearsing and stuff. And the show was, the head of that show, the star of that show was an act I'd never seen before. Don Williams and his trio. There was three of them, bass and guitar. The crowd went crazy. He wore a cowboy hat, he had a quiet voice, and I knew Don Williams' voice. I mean, knew his records, and he was really good. And he brought the house down. Wow. I mean, like, at the end, he got a standing encore ovation. He took off his cowboy hat, which he'd worn all night, and thanked the audience. When he took his hat off, they went even crazier. And then they had to do an encore. And I got a picture of the guys. It was Danny Flowers was one of the guitarists, and putting their heads together back on the stage and going like, "What should we do now?" And they told me later, because Danny told me the story later, that like they didn't know what to do. They played the whole set. They didn't know what to do, so they said, "Then let's do this one," And so they did, and I got the picture of that, and that's the classic photograph really one of the classic photographs that got me into Nashville. Really? Because Don Williams was managed by Jim Halsey, the same as the Oak Ridge Boys. So I had a double whammy there. I had two artists that with this big impresario, Jim Halsey, who was based in Tulsa. And so when I came to Nashville, the first time was 1977. I came here with a country music magazine called Country Music People in England, and I knew the editor and a friend of mine. And let me just backtrack and say that in 1972, I spent 4 days in Canada photographing. I almost didn't go to sleep the whole time because I thought I may never see this continent again. I'll sleep another time. 21 years old, and just keep partying on. And had 2 cities and a lot of stories that came with that. Get back to England, and I thought, I think I want to go and live in Canada. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and start off in Canada, and try that. So I got a job with a country music newspaper. This Country Music People brought me over to Nashville, and I came here for a thing called the DJ Convention. I think it was in October '77, and spent probably 2 weeks in Nashville. The first day I was here, I was sitting in the office of it turned out to be a musical director. His name was Bill Walker, Australian, over on Music Row. And I'm sitting there, and Tony, my friend, Byworth, who's the editor, is talking with Bill Walker. When they finished speaking about their business, Bill turns to me and he says, "Is there anything you'd like to do while you're in Nashville?" And I had just heard that he was, I'd been introduced that he was Johnny Cash's musical director. And I said, "Yes, please, I'd like to meet Johnny Cash."
Bold ask.
Just came out of me. I mean, wasn't planned. It just came out of me. Seemed like the right thing to say. I didn't know much about Johnny Cash. I heard the name. He said, "You're in luck. We're working together tomorrow at the Opry TV studio. Why don't you come along?" Okay. So I did. I went along to the Opry I during a camera break, they were recording a Christmas show, and with all the Sun Records people, there was Roy Orbison and Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, the Statler brothers, of course June Carter was there, and some other people. But it was a tribute to Sun Records they were doing. Elvis had died, of course, and they're doing this tribute. So anyway, during a camera break, Bill shouts over to Johnny on the stage and said, "Hey John, I want you to meet a friend of mine." And so Johnny Cash comes to the edge of the stage, and I'm in the orchestra pit, and he reaches down his big hand to me, and his extremely long hand, it's like a large man, reaches down his hand. He goes, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash," and my voice. I look up at him, and I think my voice must have shrieked, going, "Oh, my voice!" Introduced myself, and he said, "Well, come up on the stage. You're welcome. Come take some photographs." So he invited me up on the stage, and so I did. I was on the stage, and and took photographs of all these guys and the rehearsals, and different pictures. Jerry Lee at the piano, and so on.
Wow.
And Johnny and June, and these are great now historic photographs. So that was my first meeting with Johnny Cash. So I went up to Canada, and as the plane is taxiing down in Toronto, before it hit the tarmac, I went, "No, this is not it." I just had a vibe that it was not the right place to start. And I realized once I got on the ground that I was right. There was no music business there. There was one record company that didn't do much, RCA Records. And the reason they took us over there in the first place in 1972 was to promote Canadian music. And it never did very well. It didn't really take off very well. So, no, that's not the place.
Yeah.
I think Nashville's the place. And so I decided to set myself up in Nashville. I came over several times. I got a job, luckily, and to shoot David Bowie in Philadelphia for a magazine. So they flew me and the journalist from Melody Maker and the publicist over to Philadelphia, and we're having a great time. We get to the hotel, where David Bowie was staying, where we'd stay, and we were told no photographs. I go like, well, hold on.
Yeah.
No photographs. Well, he had his photographs taken in London, at rehearsals, and he doesn't like cameras out in the front of the stage. But here's some tickets to the show. I said, well, can I at least take me up to his room? And there was one of the guys who was playing with him. I think it was either Hunt or Tony Sales, who I'd worked with Iggy Pop. I'd been on the road with him with Iggy Pop, and I said, just take me up to David Bowie's room, and I can explain it to him, because and he didn't. So they gave us tickets, and it was up on the side of the stadium in Philadelphia, the Spectrum Bowl. And so in those days, security was different. It was before 9/11, of course, and stuff. And so I had my Nikon with me. So I broke it down and stuffed it into my boot. So I put film in my cowboy boots. I gave a lens to someone else to put in their pocket. I basically broke it down and spread the camera parts around between two of us. And we got to the seat, and I assembled the camera and put on a long lens and sat there. And at the end of the first set, David Bowie nonchalantly kicked. I think he was doing Station to Station or something like that, and he kicked his leg out. I got the picture, and I got the front page of the magazine, and it promoted the tour, as it should be. And it's a great print, and so if anyone wants to see it, check it out on my website.
Now that to me sounds like, so I'm listening to you to these different stories, and it seems like I think for somebody who's a photographer as well and wants to go into the industry, a lot of the story of your life and these different mega celebrities that you're meeting and taking pictures of, it kind of sounds like, well, how would I ever do that if I was, no, I'm not a photographer, but if you're wanting to do that, like, how are you in all these right places at the right time? But I'm starting to pick up little things you're saying where I'm like, well, okay, in that situation, they literally told you no, and you hid the shit and got the shot anyway.
I would say I was trained into something at the very beginning, and with the record Mirror, which was the Dezo Hoffman contract thing, and I learned something quickly. Number one, I was brought up, my father had a saying. When we complain about doing the dishes or something, and he's like, why do I have to do that? I want to watch television. And he goes like, because you've got the job. You've got the job, you do the job. You don't complain about it, you do it well, because you got the job. So when I started shooting at 16 years old, I would take my film, my contact sheets and chromes, they were slides, into the picture editor at the record Mirror. Peter Jones, his name was, and he'd look at the stuff on the light table, in the morning, and he'd go, no. Do you have anything without the blue light on it? No. The whole Rolling Stone concert, had blue lights and spotlights and the red and blue. Well, I can't reproduce red and blue. And they couldn't in those days because of the magazine format. They had an offset printing, it's called. And the way that the printing press was, those colors didn't show. They couldn't print well, they bled, and they weren't very good for the magazine. So I learned something very, very quickly. That if I wanted to be on the front, if I wanted to get into the magazine on a feature that they've sent me out on, I better bring the picture back. There were no excuses. Like, somebody pushed me at that moment, so it's out of focus or something. They don't care. No one cares. It's about what you show. What have you done? It's not how uncomfortable you are or how difficult it was. It's like, where is the picture? So I got my first front cover on the record Mirror in February. I started, as I said, on December 4th, 1967. February the 8th, of the next year, just a few weeks later, I had my first front cover of the record Mirror. It's the Beatles. I'd photographed at the Yellow Submarine premiere. John's not there, and he famously didn't turn up because he sent a cardboard cut out of himself and stuff. And it's kind of famous, and pictures like that. And there's a picture of me at Bowater House at the Yellow Submarine press premiere, and we got to photograph the Beatles, the three of the Beatles, and Paul was a bit pouty because he was like, he didn't think we should be photographing the Beatles without John there, and we thought it was funny. And Ringo lightened the situation like he always does by making a joke, and this photograph that you can see up on the screen now is actually me laughing. Ringo had just cracked a joke, and I'm walking away with my cameras, and laughing because of that. And then they showed the Yellow Submarine film in the little preview cinema, and I suppose the guys were. They watched it for a few minutes with us, and so there I was in a little cinema with the Beatles, three of the Beatles in the background, in the back watching the film with us. Of course, they didn't stay; they'd seen it before, they didn't need to stay. So then my second, no, excuse me, I did that wrong. That's a different date. I did get that. That story is completely true, but I did get that picture. But that was published later on that year. My first picture that was published in February '68. Sorry, a few weeks later was a group called Manfred Mann doing the Mighty Quinn. They were doing the Bob Dylan song, the Mighty Quinn, and I photographed them on a TV show posing for me, on set, and that became the front cover of the magazine. The other one was September of '68, the Beatles, and that's where I got that picture. And basically what we did was like, we had you worked for a certain, you had your picture editors you were going for. Dezo Hoffman lost his contract in 1968. In the beginning of 1968, he lost his contract with the Record Mirror. So, and I got fired. I got laid off, basically. I went to work for him, so I worked for him as an assistant in December 67. But by June of 68, he had to lay me off. He had no money. And he was post-Beatles, and, he just wasn't doing very well, So I lost my job, basically. So he said, you can work from the studio, I'll pay you commission, and anything you get, and I'll give you a small retainer to be here, like £7 a week, to be there, which isn't very much. That's like $5 or something. And I really should own my pictures. From that point on, I became self-employed. Anything I shot from July 68 onwards is mine. But it got melded into Dezo Hoffman's library and then got bought by an agency, and then that agency got bought by another agency, and not being a rich individual, because I'm a photographer who got ripped off a lot financially, I wasn't able to hire the proper lawyer to go and fight the case for me. And I did attempt it several times, and the law should be on my side. So a lot of the pictures that from that time is not legally something I cannot license them and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I can print them. I have an agreement to sell them. Sell prints, reproductions of them, gallery type prints, but I can't license them myself, and I lost a lot of money and lost the clout that way.
Yeah, it's a bummer. Yeah, because you could be some of those photos are of, at this point, legendary figures who many of them I'm sure have passed or are very, very old, and those photos are licensable to all sorts of things.
Yeah, I didn't know at the time exactly.
Oh yeah, you were 17, 18.
I didn't know at the time what was really happening. I was a fan of all this stuff, but yeah, I started to play. I wanted to be a musician too. I wanted to be a drummer, and there was a drum shop around the corner from Dezo Studio in Shaftesbury Avenue, downstairs from where the Record Mirror was too, and called Drum City. And I'd go and hang out with the guys there every day. Lunchtime, I'd just go over there and hang out with the boys in the shop. And I started taking drum lessons there. But I couldn't afford drum lessons. I didn't have enough money. I only earned £7 a week, and I wasn't getting commission either, as Dezo never paid me. So I had been photographing at the jazz club, Ronnie Scott's. I'd photographed a jazz drummer, Buddy Rich, as it turned out, because my drum teacher told me something about he liked Buddy Rich, and I think, I photographed him. You have? Wow! So I started bringing him prints, and so I would give him prints in exchange for drum lessons.
Wow!
So a joke I make, I use a little standard joke, is that, I had to take a picture on the way to the stage. That's how I became a photographer. But in a way it's true, because I was actually paying for drum lessons by my photography.
Yeah, wow.
And I was in a band. I was playing in semi-pro bands, and I'd go out on weekend gigs, and stuff like that. But I was actually paying my income was coming from photography, paying drum lessons with photography. And yes, I knew Buddy Rich, and he gave me, let me sit on the step by his drums on the stage, with him at the club, and I got great stuff, and I worked on this Ogre Whistletest show, and I was a young man, I was gung ho and like unstoppable, I was very shy too. I stuttered terribly in those days. I didn't speak very much, and I really had trouble answering the phone. I couldn't really go studio, or something like that, or I couldn't really say my name very well. My name is, I couldn't really get the A out of Alan very easily, and but visually, I had this thing happening, and when I look back on my photographs, my early photographs from when I was an amateur to, when I first started, even with the Brownie 127 camera. I've still got some of those photographs, and some of them I've scanned and put them up on my site and stuff, and they're amazing. Actually, some of those photographs I took when I was 8 years old. I could see the early me in it. I see the composition. I see early me. And it's very interesting. And so visually, communication to me was the way I did things. And
do you think that your stutter played into that? Into like if you were shy, vocal, maybe speaking wasn't your main form of expression, the camera was. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I think so. I didn't speak until I was like, apparently I didn't even speak very much and as a baby until I was like nearly, I don't know, 4 or 5 or something, like my parents said, they were quite worried about me and I didn't really speak, I mean, I was very introverted and, yeah, I mean, I don't remember that part of it, but I was very shy. And very shy around, girls and stuff, and I had a little girlfriend at kindergarten school, and very embarrassed to that my mother invited her to my birthday party and stuff, but that shyness and that voice, like I would say something I learned at the beginning at Dezo Hoffman's. And Dezo was very good. I mean, he was from Yugoslavia. He was born in Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, actually. There's no longer Slovakia now, and Croatia. But those Slavic people have an artistic way about them. Have another way. And he was a very good communicator and photographer. And he said, "It's not about you. The photograph is not about you. It's, I mean, basically what he tried to explain was, his Czech accent was that we were a catalyst for the photograph. Like you put the ego aside. It's about the person you're photographing, not about you. You're the operator of the camera." And I've always kept that into my system, where it's like, no, the camera breaks down. It's not about the camera. It's not about me. It's not about my conversation. It's like I'll do whatever it takes to make a photograph happen. If I'm one-on-one in the studio and one-on-one in a session, I have my technique of doing things.
Yeah.
But when you're in the presence of these people, these big stars, they don't want to know about you. They're not interested in what you did last night. Did you have dinner? Did you what? No, they're not interested in you. It's them. They're the star. You take those photographs. And I was brought up with like Dezo Hoffman photographs, magazine photographs and other photographs like that on magazine pictures I had on my bedroom wall, tear sheets, if you like, torn out, and stuck on my wall of pop stars. And so I saw these pictures and here I am with a camera. I'm going to take a pop star picture to go on the wall.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy. It's not brain surgery. It's pretty simple, And I had these, if Ringo's standing in front of you, or John Lennon, or whoever it is, or, Iggy Pop, or something, it's that, I'm not sitting down with Iggy Pop having a discussion about life. I'm taking his photograph. I'm his photographer on the road. It's about that. And it's all about that at that point, And at one point in 1978, I think it was 78, I was on the road with Iggy in Holland. And a first gig I get to in Holland, and it was a very quite a low stage. And I'm the show photographer, and I'm bending down to load the film. You have to load film into your Nikon. 2 cameras on my shoulder, one color, one black and white. That's how you always shot. And I'm bending down. I'm loading the film, and I kind of at the corner of my eye see this thing, and Iggy had this thing of grabbing the mic stand, and the mic. I saw this mic stand with toppled, and it fell straight for me. I mean, the clip of the mic stand literally hit me right on the bridge of the nose. I wasn't wearing glasses in those days, but I'm spurting with blood. Now I am at an Iggy Pop concert, spurting with blood. And there's a Dutch photographer next to me, and I said to him, "Am I okay?" And he gets a flashlight, looks at me, and goes like, "It looks pretty bad. Maybe you should go backstage and deal with it." I said, "Well, I missed the show, won't I?" I was like, "I'll just photograph it. If it's out of focus, I miss it. No, whatever. I'll just carry on." And it turned out I actually had the photograph in the dressing room. I took my classic Iggy Pop photograph in the dressing room right before that happened, actually.
Yeah.
And it's still good, and you can see it up on the screen right now. And then so I spent a few weeks working with him in Holland, and then we went to then back into the British tour, and photographed him during that time. It was great. I loved Iggy. I loved the music, and songs like "I Want to Be Your Dog" and stuff, and it was great. It was great energy, and although Iggy was pretty drugged out at that time and crazy, I kind of liked him.
Really?
I liked him. I liked the man. And later on, I after David Bowie died, I got a deep dive into YouTube stuff, and I went, yeah, I like Iggy, and I highly recommend an Iggy. He does the John Peel. It's called the John Peel Lecture. John Peel was a kind of melancholy voiced avant-garde DJ radio presenter in England, and when he died, they started this thing called the John Peel Lecture, and it's about the truth of the music business. And Iggy Pop does one of these. I recommend you watch it, listen to it. It's fantastic. It's fabulous. I mean, he's very well spoken about the music business, about how things work, and it's fascinating. And Iggy Pop's a fascinating man who I wish I'd met again. And I got to work with David Bowie, but briefly, as I said, in 1978 at Philadelphia, but I never had any one-on-one time with him. I've forgotten my question now. Where are we going with this?
Oh, no worries. I mean, we're just reflecting on these cool stories. I mean, I had a question, which is whatever happened to your nose?
So when I got back to England from Holland, my mother took me to the doctor. And the doctor said, "You've got concussion."
Whoa. Still... However many days later?
A couple of days later, 2 or 3 days later, I had concussion, basically, from this thing.
Wow.
Now, the worst thing you can do, I found out from concussion, and this is what the guys did to me, the crew, like backstage at the gig, they're giving me a drink, they're giving me a joint. We're on the bus after that, and then Iggy was like very apologetic to me, by the way. He's a nice guy. He apologized. It was an accident. The one thing you don't do is do drugs and alcohol, because that's the part of the brain, apparently, that the concussion hits. Then it can really do damage. And so they found out that, and they found out that my eye was like a slightly different color on one side, and
wow.
and like that, and that was just... Maybe I was born to be a photographer because my eyes are like that, So nothing happened, basically. I mean, I had concussion, and
they just send you home and say, and
I just like be okay in a few days, and so it was. I never thought of it again. So that's.
Did your eyes go back?
Who knows? I don't know. I mean, they just noticed that one of my pupils on the right was slightly dilated, or it had a different color to it, or something. I don't remember now. It's I don't look at my eyes. I look out of them.
Yeah,
I use them. And that's the important thing. I look out. I don't look in. I'm not.
I know.
I don't.
It's almost a cool motto for a photographer.
I'm doing a book on Nashville at the moment, and my book is going to be all photographs were taken in Nashville, nothing else. Every picture, I mean, Alice Cooper, it's not about country music. It's about Alan Messer's experience as a photographer in Nashville.
Wow. And is it primarily photos? Is it?
Yeah,
Will you be writing as well?
It's a coffee. I'm designing it myself. It's in progress. It's totally me. You know, the only pictures that are not in Nashville, there's 2 or 3 introductory ones that came from of how did I get to Nashville. And Marty Stewart had asked me, and he said, "How did you get to Nashville?" It's like you asked me this in the podcast. You know, how did you get from London to Nashville? And so some of these photographs I did of Tammy Wynette or of Don Williams or the Oak Ridge Boys appear just in Loretta Lynn to show like that's. These pictures are so good they have to exist in the book as an introductory of how I got here. But other than that, everything is taken in Nashville.
Well, in some ways, it sounds like Nashville came to England to get you.
It could have done. I don't know. I mean, Nashville, country music's now big in England. It's quite a big following. I did an exhibition at the Royal Albert Hall a couple of years ago for a country music festival. And it was a great honor to do it there. And in an area that, in a theater where I used to work, and the Albert Hall is one of the grand buildings of England. And they've archived my work there as well in their basement archives, which is really good. And so yeah, Nashville I've been here 46 years, and it's been an amazing journey, you know. And I didn't mean to stay here. I mean, were you okay there?
Yeah,
that was just a.
That's fine. The camera just flashed off for a second.
Okay, I'll just be an edit. So I've been in Nashville 46 years, and I didn't mean to stay here. I came here as a stepping stone into America. I thought I'd experience America. You know, Canada wasn't going to be it in '72. So in 1978, May '78, I came to live in Nashville because of my connections I had with the country music scene here. I thought, well, this is good because, you know, starting off in New York seems a bit tough. Going to LA was the future for me. So I thought I'll start in Nashville where they know me.
Move from here.
And move from here. And maybe I'll spend 2 or 3 years in Nashville, and then I'll go to LA and do a little bit of time there, and then I'll move to the Triangle and get to New York, and then from New York I'll fly back to England with my bag of swag and carry on in England. I get to Nashville and find that I'm starting to become the #1 photographer here. I'm starting to get work. My professional dreams are breaking out. Like I'd never had worked like this before. I'm getting album cover jobs. I'm getting, you know, publicity jobs. I mean, I did some of that in London at my studio, but never at this volume. And I went out to LA. I flew out to LA, and with my book, with my portfolio, and I'd make cold calls to record companies. And I'd phone up, and I'd phone up the art director's office, and I said, "Can I come in and speak to your art director, please, and show him my book?" And his secretary would say, "Well, actually, you have to drop a book off, you know, and we'll review it, and then we'll send it back to you." I go, "Oh no, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I'm leaving tomorrow. I really just cannot do that, you know." And you know, and where are you from again? I'm from Nashville. You don't sound like you're from Nashville. I am, you know. And so I represent myself as a Nashville photographer with an English accent, and I really wasn't pretending. I was, you know.
Yeah.
And my accent was probably more English than it is now. And so that would already start a conversation with, "Well, you couldn't possibly come in the next hour, could you?" "I'll be right there." Go in there and show my work. Bingo. "Okay, we'll work with you." And I started getting work from these art directors in Nashville from LA. And they were flying people in. They were flying photographers in at expense. They had to take a flight. The photographers didn't know the scene here in Nashville. They didn't know the artists necessarily. They had more expense by flying, you know, accommodation and all this. They got to rent a studio. Sometimes they'd rent my studio. I'm here. The artists know me. I know the territory, and I'm saving the money, and I'm good, and I'm selling albums. Basically, I'm doing the work that they need, you know. And that was the difference, because what I said before about the quality of stuff coming out of Nashville, at that point it was terrible. There were a couple of photographers here. There was a photographer here called Slick Lawson, who's I really replaced him, you know, and you know I never liked his commercial work. And there's a documentary being made on him at the moment, which I'm in. And I never really liked his work. I didn't see it, and I became the one, really, and that's how it worked, you know. And my professional dreams were happening, and I was shooting it every day of the week, and
Wow.
I was given a studio to work in. I was invited into the studio by a friend of mine, Ken, who was an advertising photographer, and he allowed me to use his darkroom. He allowed me to use the studio where I did a lot of photographs. I had an album cover in there, the Oak Ridge Boys, and Together album. I got married in, I think, 81, briefly. We bought this house where we're in now together. That marriage didn't last very long, and then I lost the house, but I did a lot of work here in this house. I set the studio up, I built this basement, and I shot session after session here. You know, really a lot of stuff. I did some amazing work here.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying you did a shot a day back in the 80s. How long did that continue where you were kind of working at that volume and pace?
Mid-80s. It's hard to tell. I mean, I was working so much at that time that in the end, I couldn't print on my own. It was like too much. I need some life, you know. I need some life.
Yeah.
And a photographer I knew called Norman Seif, who had rented my studio here, had come in here and rented this place. But his assistant and printer was called Keith Williamson. So Keith said he'd print for me. So I used to FedEx the film out. In those days, you could do that, and I'll show you in a minute. I've got some cameras here. I got the film actually with me.
I'm curious about that Hasselblad because it's a cool looking camera.
Yeah, and I shot a lot of sessions on that camera, and I've got film here that I shot. You know, like I'm slightly off mic here for a second. But yeah, right. I mean, like right here is like. Here we go. You can see that there's a roll that this Tri-X that goes in a camera like this. So here's my 35mm camera, and this goes in here like this film. Later on, I got, and actually it's loaded in here right now, is T-Max 3200, which was a Tri-X was the main film that everyone used for years and years and years, 400, and I rated it at 800 and pushed the film, the technical stuff. This is 3200, and I'd rated it to 2000, which is in my camera right now. And I shot hundreds of things like that, like that, and it was great. And then the Hasselblad takes 120 film. It's a bigger format, 12 exposures. And here, I'll show you that. Lean over here, and I'll bring this.
It's a very cool looking camera.
This in. This is we can see this over here. So this is the Hasselblad. It's got a viewfinder, and you look down right to there, or you put it to your eye like that, and then it has film that goes in the back, and you take the back off like that, and load a film in there.
Wow.
You know, and then you shoot 12 exposures. So you'd have a black and white film or color backs, you know, several backs of these things, and so you could shoot one or two frames of an image in black and white, then take it off and do the same thing in color, and that's how you went, you know.
And is that a medium format camera?
Yes, a medium format, 120mm.
To my understanding, the main thing with a medium format camera is it's just a bigger slide of film.
Here's the film. Okay, so this is. Let me look in the camera here so I can see what I'm doing. So here's a box of Tri-X which I'd load into that, and then here's one I've unwrapped there. So that's what's in there, and that goes in the back of the Hasselblad, and you shoot those things, and then you process that, and then you get contact sheets made and stuff. Now the problem about modern day is digital. And digital is, I have to say, I really quite like it. I love film. I've shot it for 40 years. It's wonderful. The tones and everything is great. I was totally comfortable with it. Color was always a little bit difficult because you had to like test it and make sure you had it, and you could do that in the lab. You could test it and stuff, but you could miss something. So you shot a Polaroid, and I bought a Polaroid along to show you. To show you that thing. So I brought along the camera I use mostly in most of my photo sessions, which is a Hasselblad, which I showed you before.
Yeah.
And then this is the interchangeable film, which is fantastic on this camera. There's the film, which I just showed you. It goes on the back for the actual film. But before you do the film on the back, in those days we had. So there's the film back. So before you started exposing film, you shot a Polaroid, and so this attachment. This is a more modern version, but there used to be another one. It was a lovely piece of furniture, but it didn't work anymore. So you took it took a picture on the back that created an image that was basically one of these.
Oh, wow.
So you get a sheet of that comes out, and then you check your light. That's a picture of me. But there's a picture. You'd get the picture that's cut out in the shape, and you'd check your light. And so you'd write what we used to do. I used to do is write on there, 30th f8 or 30th f11. So I knew what my exposures were. And then I'd keep that to go with the film, the color film, for the tests. So I knew what I was shooting. The problem with all that stuff is sometimes your best shot is your first shot. And if it's on the Polaroid but it's not usable, the Polaroid, your test shot may be the one. Now with digital, you can't miss it, and so I love it. You can see exactly what you're doing, so it's much easier to work with. I mean, like my whole catalog, really. I would be doing books, and I would be a lot further ahead if I could do an inventory of all my work needs to get scanned in, and the only way you can see work now, photography now is through the computer, like black and white negatives get scanned,
Right.
and like labs now when they process the film, will scan it for you, but the scan stuff like. My Johnny Cash collection, I worked with Johnny Cash for 30 years, like 3 decades. I got about 10,000 frames. That's a lot of scanning to do 10,000, images.
Yeah.
And there's people who do them, but you have to have a budget for it, and so on. So I mean, like I shot 30 rolls, 50 rolls of film on a photo session, sometimes 60. And if I was shooting every day, that's a lot of film, And not every frame needs to be scanned, because not to me that's not like 30 pictures. It could be 3 poses, in the whole thing, and I just shoot a lot like that. But often the first picture is the one. It's funny how the first picture can be the one, and it just happens sometimes.
Do you think? What do you think that is? Is that your instincts?
Yeah, it's your instinct, your intuition. Yeah, you just feel it. And it's there. And a lot of stuff about being a photographer is like, yeah, you have to be in the situation, you have to be there. Being there is 9/10 of it, but then, and you have to learn your craft as well. Know how to expose it properly and all that. But after that. You just let it roll, just be emotional, just feel it, take a picture, get into a conversation with someone, whatever it takes, and I'll often put people in situations if I have to and make them react to me.
Yeah. Get them to laugh or
do something or just something, I mean, there'd be something of like, some people are great to work with, like Robert Duvall, the actor I photographed here at the house for his album cover. The album never came out in '84, but we worked together for a month, And he was great to work with because an actor, he understood it.
Right.
He understood he understood that the time it took to set it up, and then he understood that when you got the moment, you got it, and move on, and you didn't have to say, you know. And you know, I tell him what I'm going for, and it's, you know, I it's not really a good assimilation, but in a way, I think of photography is a bit like sex. If you have to say when you come, you shouldn't be there. You know, if you don't know, and she doesn't know, you got a problem. You know, and I think photography is the same way. You know, it's about like, you know, when you've got the picture, move on. You know, and if you don't get the picture, and if you feel you haven't got it, you make sure. Like as I'm saying, I'm very shy. I was very shy. I'm still quite shy, I suppose, but less shy now. At 74 years old, I've learnt to be less shy. And you have to get the picture. I'll be adamant about getting a picture. I'll chase someone down to get the picture and make sure that we set up a photo session. I moved to New York and spent about a year in New York, and I'm in my sublet art warehouse studio in New York, and I get a phone call from CBS Records out on the West Coast. Do you know a photographer in Austin, Texas? I know a few, but why? And well, we have an artist who Stevie Ray Vaughan, who we want to photograph, and I said, me. And they said, but you're in New York. I said, me. There's no photographer in Austin. And there wasn't. There really wasn't. There were, but they weren't very good. And I said, and it had to be me. I said, it has to be me. And I went down. I flew down there, and I got it, and it turned out to be one of my greatest photo sessions. You know, it turned out Stevie died not long later, not too long later. You know,
wow.
And it was a really good photo session. I mean, we hit it off. There's stories to go with that, of course, but years later, classically, it still exists.
Yeah. Well, it's very cool. One thing that, because you've always carried a camera, and that, of course, is your trade, you know, through hard work and serendipity and all the different things, you got to be privy to a lot of like very historical musicians' careers.
Right.
I mean, I think there's a lot of photographers who would be lucky to have just one of many of the names you had, you know, to work with Johnny Cash for 30 years. If that was the only thing you had done,
yeah. Well, Johnny
you could hang your hat on that.
Johnny Cash phoned me up, or his assistant phoned me up at the time. Then he got on the phone, and I'd been here 10 years. So I'd met him in 77.
Yeah.
But I'd been here 10 years, and I'd proven I'd risen up. You know, he knew I was at the top of my game, and he wanted a photographer, and you know, saw my work, and I fit the mold. You know, and he had another photographer before me who'd been a chronicler of Johnny Cash, and as these icons go, and I didn't know this at the time, you know, how these things worked. You know, I was kind of naive, but you know, icons like that have chroniclers. You know, like me, and the one before me was Jim Marshall, who was a great photographer. You know, I greatly admire him, and he did like the Folsom Prison stuff. He did the finger picture, you know, all that stuff. But I was a different era. I jumped in. I started working with Johnny in 1987, and we went on the road. And he phoned up and said, you know, would you come out on the road with me? And I said, yeah. So I arrive at Nashville Airport, and I got my camera bag on my shoulder, and I must look like a photographer. And I see this man standing on the curbside in his long black coat. You know, it was Johnny Cash, and a briefcase under his arm. I walk up to him, and he must have known who I was. You know, he said, "Good morning, Alan." Never photograph me when I'm picking my nose, and never in a limo. Good morning, I just wrote this song. and start telling me a song, and then we go into the airport and get on a flight, and and I start taking pictures. But immediately he introduced himself to me, and there's no embarrassment about, like, is it okay to take a picture? Is it not? Like, we're professionals on the road, take pictures. This is what he wants done,
Yeah.
And we hit it off immediately. He took a couple of pictures of me with my camera, and we got there on the bus, and stuff, and yeah, and I got to work with him and travel with him in June, and stayed in their house in Jamaica in 1999, and did his album covers, and was a chronicler of him for several years, decades.
Wow. The limo thing was interesting. Is that just because that doesn't really compute with the
I
image
suppose
of
he
Johnny
didn't
Cash?
like being in a limo. He didn't like that aspect of things,
Yeah, it's interesting because even when you say rich country star, I'm like, well, yeah, I guess Johnny Cash had to be incredibly rich if you think about it, but he doesn't come off like a rich person. He fits his image of. If I think of Johnny Cash, the first thing I don't think about is like an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos billionaire type. You know what I mean? That's not who he is.
Yeah, Johnny Cash was not. I mean, John Cash was never. He was a humble man. He had his ego. Hello, I'm Johnny Cash, and you're not. When it's time to go on stage, it takes a lot for a person like that to walk up on stage and be Johnny Cash. I mean, it took a lot of energy out of him. I mean, when a show started, he was anxious to go on. It's like the curtain was 8:30. If it was like 8:35 and the show hadn't started, he's standing there going, "We got to go now. We got to go." I mean, he was ready to go with Johnny Cash. It's like, had to go. I mean, it was just incredible energy around him. And was
it like
he
became another person when he was on stage?
The same person, but the force of energy, a power of being Johnny Cash. Like, when John Cash walked into a room, you knew he was there. When his brother walked into a room, it wasn't the same. When Johnny Cash walked into a room and John Cash walked into a room, you just knew. He was a man amongst men. He was a man amongst women. He was a leader. He was a character, very strong, and his music was great. He was a great entertainer. He knew what he was doing. I mean, he knew what he was doing out there. I mean, he was serious about his music. It was a laugh a minute on the road with him. I mean, he was a great jokester. He loved pranks. He loved jokes. He loved having fun. But when it came to showtime, Johnny Cash, and he loved, having his picture taken, and he enjoyed photography himself. He was a photographer. He liked it,
Did you ever go out to his ranch where he had his where they've now turned into a studio?
Well, I mean, Johnny had, he had his home in Hendersonville.
Yes, that's the one, yeah.
And then the cabin that is now his cabin studio.
Yes.
I photographed him over there. The cabin was his. He had a little farm, basically, enclave, if you like, with some animals in there, some emus and whatever, just kind of wild, a lake and a barn, and a cabin where he used to like to go and just write and hang out. And I photographed him there. The cover of songwriter album would be I photographed on the porch right there. I think I shot it in 1987, and I did a photo session at his house. And the songwriter album that was released, a couple of years ago, became a big hit. My cover, my photograph, was so powerful that it sold the album before the music was even released. It was one of the biggest.
That's what a great cover does. That I mean, there's a few albums right here next to you, like the Fleetwood Mac one.
Fleetwood Mac
great
Rumours
cover.
album is a great album. I mean, there's a Revolver
there.
album there that is next to me. If the camera's picking that up, it's not.
It's not, but whatever.
But
You can hold it up if you want. But yeah, I mean
I mean, this album right here. I mean, this is on this. This is one of my favorite photographs by Robert Freeman on the back. And I love this photograph. It's one of my favorite photographs. And of course, this album was designed by Klaus Voormann. I think he did the graphics on this. I'm not sure if it was Klaus, but very influential album, yes. And all these Beatle albums. And when I started designing albums, which I did. And I did it upstairs in the house. I'd have, and I still do it, but in those days, this area down here, by the way, this was my darkroom, going to be my darkroom, but it was where your audio recording studio is, my design studio, and I started the design studio called Flamingo, down here, and I was designing album covers, and pre-digital, so you glue up stuff, and so I would dummy up an album and put it with I like my albums being on the floor against the wall, like leaning, so I can thumb through them and you can just see them, like you got the face of these things.
Yeah.
So a stack of them. So I would take an album cover that I've just designed and dummy it up and stick it on a board in front of the other albums to see, does it fit?
Yeah.
Do I like it? Could I live with that? And an album cover to me should be, yes, it's about the art of it, and it's got to be pretty, but it has to speak about the music. Like, if you know who the artist is, you're probably going to buy it anyway because you're a fan of that artist. But what if you don't know? What if you just see that? And and there's an album I shot in '86. Some of it I did here in this house, and some of it I did on the street. And it's Guitar Town by Steve Earle. It was his first big break country album. And Steve told me several years later, in fact, in recent years, he told me that we were talking about doing things well. We were talking about perfection and our craft and experiences. And he said, Bruce, and he meant Bruce Springsteen. Took me a moment to think about who he meant. But he said Bruce Springsteen told him that he discovered Steve's music when he saw my album cover. He saw this album cover on the shelf in a record shop and went, that's interesting. Who's that? Picked it up.
Yeah.
That's bingo. That's exactly what I want. Is someone to look at it, be attracted by the image, the picture, and take it home and listen to it and go, oh, I actually like this music.
Right.
So he discovered the image before he discovered the music, and then he locked into the music, of course, and the rest is history.
Well, a great album cover ends up being a part of the musical experience. They become linked in your mind when you think of the visual of the album. I've got the Beatles Abbey Road album cover tattooed to my arm, and then I can't raise my sleeve right now, but I have the Oasis What's the Story Morning Glory album cover here, and that's just a visual way for, how am I going to display this album? The cover is the thing.
Album graphics become iconic.
They do.
And I like shooting iconic. I like that iconic. I like the way I was brought up with photographs, magazine covers on my wall. I like the fact that my magazine editor, Peter Jones, at the beginning when I was 16 years old, was demanding of me of creating a quality so I could bring in a picture and be reproduced. And in later years, I was at his 80th birthday party, I think it was, and I thanked him. And I hadn't seen him in all these years. And I said, Peter, you are my mentor. Thank you so much. You shaped my career. He said, I wasn't trying to be difficult. I just had to get a magazine out.
Yeah.
I said, but you shaped my career by forcing me into that position of this if you want to get reproduced in the magazine, you better bring Peter Jones the picture. Yeah, that's bingo. I want that. So I got my cover. I got my first front cover of Manfred Mann in February '68. In September '68, I have the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, and I had other reproductions in there. Bingo. I mean, it was quite unheard of for a boy to come out of school as a teenager and get a front cover of a magazine. And when the headmaster had told me at the school that you'll fail in life if you leave the school, and a few weeks later I sent him back. I mean, whatever, February, I left in December, so that's 6 weeks later.
Yeah.
I sent back the cover of the Record Mirror, and it's on the notice board apparently in the school, and now he's telling people like, oh, Alan Messer's an old schoolboy. He came from our school. Look what he made good. A few weeks before, he was telling me that, oh, you'll fail in life. So like, okay, if you have to believe in yourself. You have to be, and you also, more than just believe in yourself, you have to know if you're good or not. You mustn't fool yourself that you're good. And go like, songwriters or musicians will say, I don't get played on the radio. Well, there may be a good reason for that.
Yeah.
A good artist will break through. A good photographer, a good painter, a good musician. I mean, who are the iconic artists? Who are the people we listen to? Why do you like Oasis? Why do you like the Beatles? Why do you like Bruce Springsteen or whoever it is? Anyone through history who has become the one that you listen to all the time. How did Frank Sinatra get so big? The generation before me. That wasn't my music. Frank Sinatra wasn't something I listened to. Elvis wasn't something I listened to. I did hear Elvis, but not my music. The Beatles were my music. That's what I learnt. That's what I started on. And I had every single Beatle record and still do. I bought everything. So, yeah, you have to be good, and you have to know you're good, and you mustn't pretend that you're good. It's not egotistical to say you're good. An ego has to go out the window. You can't walk around with an ego. If you walk around with an ego, you just be an egotistical bastard who doesn't nobody gives a fuck, unless you're producing. I think the times have changed now. I know of new photographers who are egotistical and part of the act, and so it's different. I'm just not that way. I'm just,
Well, social media has changed so much. For a while there, kind of more narcissistic, ego-driven people were thriving on social media. I think still are.
Right.
Hopefully we're transitioning from that. But the thing is I've noticed that so many of the ideals we were raised with for how you're supposed to act culturally, how you're supposed to present yourself, humbly but confident, is kind of an ideal mix. A lot of that's gone out the window because on social media, somebody can go be a complete egotistical asshole, and we're all interested in watching that shit. Because
I'm
sometimes it's very fucking interesting.
I like what we're doing now. I like the fact that two guys can sit in a room like this, and talk and share this conversation and these thoughts with the world through social media, which is what this will be out on, and on the web. But going back to iconic and going back to album covers and stuff, and you mentioned algorithms, and I forgot, like, what I used to do was spend a lot of time in a record shop, and I'd go in an evening, and maybe I'd smoke a joint, get stoned, and just like go into Tower Records or Cat Records, whatever it was in the town here, and enjoy browsing the shelves, the record shop, and look at the covers, just see how they react. I reacted to them, learn what was happening in the album covers.
Yeah,
buy some albums too. I'd often buy several 3 or 4 or 5 albums. I had money, so I was like, bring albums home and enjoy them. But I would spend a lot of time looking at the graphics and learning and going like, and where would I fit in this? Where will whatever I'm doing now fit in? And I got to work with people, like I said Steve Earle. I did his breakthrough album, Guitar Town, which is a classic album, and I still love it. I didn't do the photography for Dwight Yoakam's launch album on Warner Brothers, which was Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But I photographed him for the promotional. He already had those pictures done for the album, and he licensed it to the record company in its entirety. But he didn't have promotional photographs, so I did his promotional photographs for that album project. So we did a photo session here at the house upstairs. There were some great pictures, and we went downtown on Broadway and shot some stuff. And Dwight has recently, in the last couple of years, used 2 of the pictures I shot. One on the recent album, he used both of them from the ones I did. One I shot downtown in a bar, and he's like sprawled out in a bar, in a seedy bar, like he's drunk, and he used it on the inside cover of a box set he did. Something like whenever I fall off the bar stool or something like that, and it's great. It's a really Dwight does great graphics, and I got the front cover of his latest Record Store Day album. Actually, I shot that one in New York with Johnny Cash at the Living Grammy Awards show, and there's a picture I shot there of him, with his guitar and stuff. And so most of my work turns up on album covers, and I get licensed for stuff, and I'm, I really enjoy it. I mean, I've shot or art directed or designed hundreds of album covers. It's amazing, And I started doing that. Why did I start doing that? I started doing that because I started to see some of the albums I shot were amazing. Like I did a George Thorogood album once in Memphis with the art director Henry Marquez, who was EMI art director, and he came down there. And when I was in New York, and I went and picked up the album cover from the record company, I didn't get them. He didn't allow me in the office. I wasn't able to go there. Just at reception, you had an envelope with my name on it. And this was before cell phones and stuff,
Yeah.
And so I'm in the elevator, and I'm opening up the package, and I open it up, and I go, oh my God, that's great. And there was a payphone outside on the street. So I got a payphone, and I phoned him upstairs. And I said, I got through to him, and I said, Henry, this album is fantastic. It's not what I expected that was going to come from our shoot. That's what I wanted. I wanted an art director to take my work and move it in a direction that I didn't know was going to happen. Sometimes we worked on stuff. Sometimes we worked on things together. Like one of my very first album covers I did in England was a band called Cato Bell, which you've never heard of. But I shot it in my studio in Newman Street. And the idea was to have them being hit by a tidal wave. And this wave was in Piccadilly Circus in London. There was a Coke sign, a big square Coke sign.
Okay,
it was quite well known at that time. And this big thing would flash around the Coke. It was kind of a square sign. They said, we're going to have the picture, and instead of a Coke sign, we're going to be the photograph you took of the band in the studio, but the tidal wave is going to be hitting them as this tidal wave hits Piccadilly Circus. Well, I came up with this idea. We're going to hit them with a bucket of water. So I threw buckets. I mean, we were on the 3rd floor of this building, this office building.
Yeah.
The building was empty, as it turned out, thank God. And I put plastic sheeting on the ground, on the floorboards, and the band are posing up there, and they get a bucket of water and throw it at them. I shot it with the Hasselblad, and and get this, and it's perfect, and then so that was something that was working. The art direct design company called Seabrook, Graves and Aslet, and great designers. I think they'd worked with the Rolling Stones on the Black and Blue album. Not sure about that, but that was a concept album that I worked on at the beginning, from the beginning. So that was different. And they pieced it. I did the photography within the concept, and then they glued it together. And it happened.
So is this a composite image where
you're
getting a picture of them?
Like, I took the picture I took the photograph of Piccadilly Circus, and then I took the picture of the band, and they glued it together.
And are you doing the band in front of like a black screen or a blue screen or anything like that? No, just a normal.
Just a normal photograph.
And then they go and cut them out in those days?
Yeah,
or how did they do
they
it?
probably just put the square in, and then they being artists put the wave in by airbrush. I suppose they put the print. They probably glued the two prints together, and then took an airbrush thing and created the
drew in the tidal wave
design. Yeah, and I have the album cover if you want to put it up on the screen.
Yeah,
we can if that becomes a something you want to show.
Well, it's crazy, and I think the further we go along, the less younger people will appreciate the difficulty of doing something like that, because I could take my phone right now and take a picture of you and go to AI software and tell it to put you into a tidal wave, and it could do that.
Yeah, so I think let's start a new little thing here. So
yeah,
AI, photography, composition, design. I don't really like AI. I mean, it's here to stay. It's the future. I like realism. I like to create it myself.
Yeah.
Now, I do use AI slightly in Photoshop. There are a few effects, like a focus thing or a sharpening thing, enlargement thing, but I don't use AI to create, like, I want this bumblebee to be sitting on a plant and on someone's head, or
they go find a bumblebee.
I'll take a picture of a bumblebee myself, and it won't be that way. I won't create. I don't create library images that I want to make and use AI for. So I don't use it for that composition. I use AI in a whole nother way, and it's really as a part of a tool, not completely. So I like the idea of the thought that comes first and the composition of things, and most of my work is real. I like real, and you can be graphic, and you can be a graphic, and I think album covers. So I started designing album covers by the fact that I didn't like the way some of the art directors the record companies were showing my covers up. I thought my photographs were better than some of the covers I saw, and so I was like, I can do that. It's not difficult, and it's really not difficult to design a cover. And I started designing here in this house, actually. My first covers were done, with paste up and stuff, and glue and spray mount. But as soon as computers came in, I learned to do it on the computer, and it's fantastic.
How would you, before a computer, how would you do like the text of the art?
So the text, name? So before computers, you would design the text, and computer graphics text is way better. It's so much better to use. But you would design like I want the word Nashville written out. And you would type it out, and you would send it to the typesetting shop up the road here on 8th Avenue, and I would send it up there and go, I want typeset me the word Nashville in Helvetica, 12 point, 14 point, 24 point, and 32 points. So you get a sheet of letter-set letters, it's on an acetate sheet that you'd basically cut out the size that you want, and paste it down on a board.
Wow. And it would be like clear backdrop or something, so you could stick it on there. And then in the end, after you've composited these graphics and the original image, are you now taking a picture of that or scanning it
basically
some
the
way?
whole thing would then be scanned, if you like, photographed by what was called an engraver, right? So photographers suddenly we had to become engravers. We had to become post-production people. It changed completely with digital. And I like it, but it put the onus on us. It put the burden on us to be something else. It's a lot easier to design in computer. You can change your point sizes. You can change.
Right.
You have more flexibility, of overlays and sizing and positioning and all that stuff. But basically, it's the same thing. And in the old days, you take an artwork, you glue it to a board, and then you take it to the engraver, and they would shoot it, basically, scan it. And then sometimes the type could be put on separately, could be flown over. They would take it the same as computers are. So an engraver was the early stages of computering. And I remember doing a poster on an artist, William Lee Golden. I photographed him, and it became quite a famous country music poster. And it's him sitting on a horse in sunset, and I shot out in Gallatin on a farm at sunset, and I did it by. I had an umbrella. I used to shoot a lot with an umbrella, and you're out in the field with mixed light. The sun's going down, so you basically got a silhouette of this man on a horse against the setting sun, and so you put the flash on to illuminate it. But you have to have a flash. In those days, they didn't have batteries, so you had a generator. So I had a horse out there, had to get used to the generator sound. Golden was riding the horse bareback. You've got color film that has an exposure latitude of very, very little. You better hit it on the nose or you miss it, So that's why I get my Polaroid and do a test. I know my distance, so I put a red bandana on the ground. And I had someone holding the light on a monopod, and it was very windy as well that night. So the umbrella was blowing, and the horse is coming around, and I've got this thing, and then you can't turn the light on the thing, the model light, because it would get blurry. So when he rode the horse across where the bandana was, click, I take the picture. There was one thing, he was holding the reins with his hands, and his knuckles of his hands were quite raw, from the coldness and stuff. So we did a little bit of retouching. It was called Cytex in those days. So I'm sitting there with the engraver in there at the place, and he's going, can you take a little bit of redness out of his knuckle, and can you do that? And so it's just like we do now in Photoshop, early days.
But just a lot more time consuming, I'm sure.
But you had someone else, your third party. I mean, I'd much rather do it myself. How do I know what I want to do?
Yeah.
Like I now have my technique, and, it's not brain surgery, and, and thousands and millions of people do it and know how to use Photoshop or Lightroom, and I don't use Lightroom. I'm not a Lightroom person, but it's all the same,
Yeah. So as you look back at like some of your album covers, like what do you have a favorite or like a top 3?
The classic albums that stick in my mind that I've worked on: Steve Earle's Guitar Town, Merle Haggard, George Jones, A Taste of Yesterday's Wine, Tanya Tucker, Strong Enough to Bend. There's a couple of Johnny Cash ones I did. The O'Kanes, I did an album for a group called the O'Kanes. I did all the O'Kanes albums. I silkscreened one called Far From the Running. The silkscreen won a Grammy.
Wow.
Of my photograph, and so I got a Grammy Award for that one. I've been on several Grammy Award albums. That's the only Grammy that I actually got of my own. But I'm happy when album covers that I shot and artists that I worked with achieved success. The record company, like CBS Records became Sony, would bring artists into me and say, this person's going to be a big star. And you go, oh yeah, here we go. And I photographed an artist, for instance, Joe Diffie comes to mind, a country artist. And they said, this guy's going to be a big star. Well, a few weeks later, he was, I did a lot of albums. I've done so many albums like that, and trying to remember which ones are my highlights. I put it up on Facebook once. I did like 10 of my most influential albums. Which albums meant something to me. Yeah. And I'll send those to you so you can have a look at them. They may make sense to answer the question right here, because they all meant something to me. Yeah, my first album cover ever was Bobby Gentry in England.
Wow.
We got £15 for it. I didn't get any money for it because Dezo got the money. He didn't pay me. But EMI used my photograph for her English release album. It was just something that was taken from a photo shoot. It wasn't a one-on-one cover,
Yeah.
which I like to do. I like to do the one-on-ones when I can.
Now, do you have like any advice that you give young photographers or even more established photographers? Do you ever open up your bag of tricks or share with people, like, you were talking earlier about, getting into your emotions and just shooting, and like, what kind of advice, what do you think photographers need to be successful? Or
I think whenever I've taught or done any classes in schools, universities, colleges, talking to photographers, and then they want to show me their work, and I said, I'd rather you didn't. I talk to them about technical. I talk to them about the business practices, how to conduct yourself in business as a photographer, how to work in the publishing business, how to all the stuff that goes on in the back room. How you take your photograph is totally up to you. I don't think it's my position to tell someone how to be artistic, or if they are artistic. That's totally their perception. I don't like someone telling me how to do it. And a lot of the times that when I get a brief and I get an idea in my mind, that's going to be the picture, So my advice is listen to yourself, know if you're any good or not, look at people when they're editing your photographs or you're showing work, and like when people are looking at my book, when I had a physical book, when I had pages in a book, and people would look at stuff and turn the page over and not say anything, I sometimes tore those pictures out. You're like, why? Someone who said to me, I didn't say I didn't like it. You didn't say anything. I want a reaction. Oh, I hate that person. I don't like, Steve Earle. I don't care if you like him or not. Do you like the picture? It caused a reaction.
Yeah.
Okay, then that works. Great picture of Steve Earle. Great, whatever. But react in some way, positive or negative. Not just it didn't interest them. So eventually you learn, and I learned as I became a art director and designing my own album covers. I learned that a photo shoot is like, I knew what I wanted. I knew how to shoot the cover. I knew what I was looking for before I took the picture, and not just have someone look for them later and salvage something. And I think that's interesting. But what advice? I don't think I can really give advice to photographers. I think good luck. Do it your own way. Know if you're any good. Be true and honest. Be honest to people. Watch yourself in business. Make the best deal for yourself. Don't sign over your rights to everybody. And just watch. Be careful. And good luck in it. I don't know. Nowadays, I see some amazing photographs. I mean, it doesn't matter what format you're shooting, but I know one thing: you have to deliver. What is a professional? A professional is someone who delivers.
Hmm.
You're a professional photographer. You're employed by a magazine or a record company to create a story, a cover. You better come back with it. Doesn't matter if it was a bad day or a good day. You have to come back with something. If you're a musician and you've got a concert to play, you better make a great concert, because that may be the one show that people will remember for the rest of their lives. That was a great performance. That's why Johnny Cash was so intense. That's why performers are so intense. I see Steve Earle before a show. He's like, you're hanging out with him as casual, and then he's set up, right? He stands with his guitar ready to go on stage, and it's almost as if he's posing, but I don't know what's going on in there, but preparing themselves to walk out in front of the Ryman stage and do a 2.5, 3 hour show. It must be something, there is something. So, I mean, yeah, and always be good, be professional. You always have to be professional, be polite, do good work, I think that's the most important thing. But I'd say the difference of digital to analog we've moved a long way with digital. And I think it's fantastic. I love photography. Has been known, I'm known for my black and white work, and people think Alan Messer is a great black and white photographer. Well, that's because I had a camera. I have a camera like this, which is loaded with black and white. Yes, it's comfortable. I'm comfortable with this camera with a roll of black and white in it, because I was able to print it myself, process it myself, and print it myself. And color, you weren't able to. You shot it, hopefully you got it right in the exposure, and then you turned it in to a magazine or a art director, and they took it from there. And so, if it was too red, too green, or not contrasty enough, you better get it in the first shot. It's just it. So photography has been, since it started, has always been printed in black and white by photographers. Yes, some have the ability to print color, but that wasn't me. So photography has always been black and white, and hands-on in the darkroom, do your thing. Then for me came the advent of I got bored with photography. I got bored with photography at that time. I living here in this house. I got bored with it. I was shooting so many sessions, and it wore off to a point. In fact, it wore off right here because I had a construction accident here. Part of the house fell down during the construction of this basement we're in now, and I had to stop. I was forced into stop to rebuild the house in the corner of the house, which wasn't part of this area, but it's part of the other side of the house. Yeah. My kitchen fell off. So I was forced to stop, and I was honestly quite bored with photography at that point. The same backdrops, there's more and more. I was on the production belt. And it took me time to think, and I started to understand something. Fax machines were coming out, Xerox machines were coming out in that time, and I started to find that when I would Xerox a picture or fax a picture, to send to someone, I kind of liked it. Really, it gave me a look. So I started to develop a series of images. And I had a girlfriend at the time who taught at Vanderbilt, and she taught silkscreen. And what's silkscreen? She said, Andy Warhol? Not really, no. I know the name. I know the name, but I don't know the work. No, I later did. So I said to her, "So what images of mine do you think would work?" I'd already done a show at that point of these big Xerox type pictures. I'd done these Xeroxes, which I'd copied onto 4x5, basically, and reshot onto 4x5 negs and made 6-foot blow-ups, prints on plexiglass, and they were great. James Brown, all sorts of stuff. Some great pictures. And so she looks at my negs and she said, "Well, this would be good. This is the sort of thing would be good for it." And so she took me into Vanderbilt on a Saturday when they were closed, and because she was a teacher in there, and opened up the art lab, silk screen area, and there was a dark room. So I said, okay, you make a piece of line lith film, in the dark room. So you put your neg in the enlarger, project it down, and I know how to print. I'm a printer. Spent many years printing. So you project this thing down. Hold on, I got 4x5 negatives, and this is a 35 enlarger. These won't fit in here. But I know something about photography, and I know something about line film. It's just straight contrast, it's black and white. There's no tone, no middle tone. And that's what you needed to make a silk screen. So I said, okay, I could take this picture, and I used a picture I had of Merle Haggard, actually, that I'd shot in London at the Wembley Festival I mentioned earlier. So this one will work. So I said, well, I'll move it around. So I printed it 4 times onto some paper, onto this lith film. Put the corner of it, and then I said, and I can glue these pieces together, right? And she says, "You'll see the tape marks." I said, "Oh, I will." Fantastic, So we burnt a screen. We made a screen out of this glued together film, and I created a 2 or 3 color simple silk screen. It was my lesson. It was my training, to show me. Well, I later on sold that. I licensed it for a greatest hits of the 80s Merle Haggard cover.
Wow.
And that started silk screening myself, and then I moved from this house, and I went downtown to a warehouse I had on 209 Broadway. That was my studio down on Broadway. It was a warehouse, and I set up a silk screen place there, table, and I started screen printing, and that's why I won a Grammy for the O'Kanes. And I'm an old printer, so there I was, daylight printing on this silk screen stuff, and it was a successful run. One image I had, which I had done for Spin magazine. I'd photographed Johnny Cash, and Bob Guccione Jr., who ran Spin magazine, asked me for a picture of Johnny Cash. Could I do something? I don't know, red, white, and blue, I suppose. I don't know. I made it in red. Can't remember how it started, but I made this red, white, and blue silk screen of Johnny Cash. So my art director friend, Bill Johnson, was in my studio, and he looks at this, and he said, took the print away, and he said, "I got a scheme. I'm going to come back and come to you." I thought, oh, he's going to come back with the greatest hits cover of Johnny Cash for me. That's going to be it from this cover, this print. Well, he called me into his office a few days later, and he said, "How would you like to do a series of silk screen album covers called American Originals?" And I said, "I'd like to," but I'm leaving the country. I was leaving. I was about to sail back on the QE2, whatever the ship was, to Southampton. And I thought, I've had enough of Nashville. I'm leaving. And Bill was a big dope smoker, and I was too at that point. And he said, he rolled me a joint in the CBS office, and he said, "Take this, go for a ride in your El Camino, and come back and tell me what you think." So I did. Went off and burned a joint and drove around a bit. Came back and I said, "Okay, you got any more of that? I'll do the job." And so as I'm doing this job in my studio, and there's a series of, I think it was 12 or 15 album covers, it was a lot of work. And some of it I did in St. Louis, in a studio out there. I went out there and had a team working with me. It was great. It was great, very creative, great stuff. None of the photographs of the series were mine. They were archival Country Music Hall of Fame images that I used, the screen prints. But it was during that time I get a phone call from Musician magazine. My friend David Carson, who I'd met with the Johnny Cash image I'd done, a red, white, and blue thing. Can you photograph Lyle Lovett for me in Houston, Texas? I went, I'm in the middle of this big job.
Yeah.
I really can't. I don't have time. I'm on deadline. He goes, can you just fly in and out? Yes. Okay, I'll do it. Okay, so I'll just don't tell anyone I'm doing this, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I flew down to Houston, and the other studio that they recommended, and they set up this shoot and did this magazine shoot on Lyle Lovett, and he was very genial. We did the shoot, and it became a something, and as a feature in Musician magazine, and Lyle became a friend of mine not long afterwards, and and I love working with him. So that happened. So I was already, before I knew it, I was getting work. I was more work. I was like, there I am, ready to leave town, leave the country, and work is pouring in as I'm working on something else. So I complete that job, take all these other photo sessions. Before I knew it, I was, you don't walk away from work, when it's happening, and so I just kept going, and then
I think that's a good lesson for people.
I never stopped. I'm still here.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, I mean, you had an amazing career. You have an amazing career still. I mean, we probably have to start wrapping up. But as you look back, I mean, maybe this is an unfair question, but I want to ask you, like, do you have a favorite artist that you ever worked with? Do you have a clear cut, or is there just a group of them? Did you kind of
I think
love all of them?
I think I have favorite artists when I work with them. I don't know if there's a favorite artist I would say I only want to work with.
Yeah.
Like I photographed William Lee Golden of the Oak Ridge Boys with a long beard. I photographed him a lot. I photographed him in his house a lot when he started doing Mountain Man stuff. We did series of stuff. I worked with him a lot. I've worked with Steve Earle. I work with Steve Earle now. I mean, whenever I work with Steve, whenever Steve doing something, I'll text him and say, can I come along to the Opry or do something or whatever he's doing. He's going to come into my studio in a few days and we're going to take a picture. I have a lot of artists I like. I don't think there's any one artist that I would stick with. I did a lot of work with Tanya Tucker at times. So there have been artists that I have done a lot of work with repetitively, but I don't think it's any one artist. I mean, and nor do I feel like I have any one style. I mean, maybe I do have a style, and other people see a style in me. I feel like I adapt to a situation.
Yeah.
I'm sure I have a style. And other people, when they book me, I sometimes have to think about it and go, which LMS do they want? And I take a lot more pictures. Ever since digital happened, I started taking a lot more photographs. And I started taking photographs really during the Johnny Cash era. Something I always wanted was, like, this is a digital camera I have here. And I always wanted a camera that was so small that all it had was a roll of film in the back, a size of a film, that you could put a film in and it had a lens on it. So I didn't need a huge thing. And they came out with it. Nikon came out with a small camera, which I use a lot. Then Olympus came out with one that was even smaller. And I had all those film cameras, and it was so easy to keep it in my jean pocket, in my inside pocket, and come out and not carry a camera, but always have a camera handy. And then digital happened, and now, I mean, there was a time when I only photographed, I suppose, because film was expensive and I only worked like when I was paid to work or when I wanted to work. Now I take a lot more photographs just for me. Like I found that, and I learned this from a musician, Jack Pearson, who's a guitar player in town. He used to be in the Allman Brothers.
Yeah,
And
wow.
I talked to Jack one night after a concert, and I said, "Oh, it was a great show the other night, Jack, at the Station Inn." He said, "Yeah, I went home after that, and I played for another 4 or 5 hours." I went, "But you
Wow.
just did a 3 or 4 hour show." He said, "Yeah, I just got started. I was just warmed up. Then I went home and played." I thought, "Yeah, that's it. You don't, you play on performance. I do a photo session, but what happens before? What happens afterwards? What happens on the way to the session? I'm taking pictures." And I put it in practice once. I was photographing this band, and I started to photograph. I was just photographing on the way to the gig. I was photographing the setup I set up there with the swimming pool and blah, blah, blah. And I was trying to shoot stuff. And then they walked onto the set, and I started shooting stuff. And so I was already in motion, shooting, until we came to, okay, now we do the shot we want to shoot, and so on. And I think I used to shoot that way a little bit with motor drives, and maybe that's, I hadn't thought of that until now, maybe. And I used to shoot a lot with a motor drive, and so with the motor drive, you just, you're shooting until you find the moment. And I kind of liked it. It was kind of like shooting movies. It was like kind of like shooting video, And then I cut down to, like Dezo Hoffman always showed, you shoot 3 frames in 35 millimeter, just because one might get scratched, and in medium format, 2 1/4, you shoot 1. I always found that the 3 frames didn't work for me. The one did, the one good one worked. And I'm still kind of the same way. I mean, I love photography. I'm still learning about it. The digital era has been an education, and I've rolled with it since the beginning of it. I spend a lot of time, way too much time on computers these days, because everything has to be digitized.
Yeah.
And I mean, if I take photographs every day, I go out hiking. I take loads of photographs on my digital cameras. I take some on phones, But I love this. I mean, I love this one. I like. I think I should take. So this has got a viewfinder to it, and so I can take a picture of you right there, sitting right in front of me, right there. So maybe we'll post this. So there's the podcast,
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, it's like this thing is.
Yeah, that's a film camera?
This is a digital camera.
Okay,
Yeah,
what is that, a Fuji film?
It's a Fuji X100V. I've had several Fujis. I like this lap strap. Let me see, because you can do that, with it, and I always like wearing them around my wrist like that because it's comfortable. I can also pick up another camera. Like when I'm shooting with my digital camera, let me see if I'm on camera here. So yeah, I can be shooting with my camera, with that, and I got that on my wrist, and I put my camera on my shoulder and shoot with the other one that's always there. And I have a digital Nikon, which I love, that I love, I mean, I used to shoot digital, shoot film. I've shot Nikon for nearly all my life. I bought a Nikon when I was, at Dezo Hoffman's. I bought my first Nikon with £100 that my grandfather left in his will. So I went out to the camera shop and bought a camera with it. Photography is something that through analog days to all of it has been my life, and it still is my life, and it's not something I stop. I mean, I see pictures every day. I photograph. I'm inspired by light. I'm inspired by people. I'm inspired by situations. I'm also a historian. I love history. Which is how I started, really. I suppose the history of my family, why I started, taking pictures as a schoolboy. So I still look at situations that way. Like, how can I document this situation, but make it interesting? How can you make a magazine feature out of it? How can someone's appearing at the Ryman, or they're doing something, or some special occasions happening? I want to be there. I like Memorial Day. I like to go down to the graveyard and the National Cemetery in Madison and photograph Memorial Day. I photograph for me, just because it's emotional. It's America. It's American history. My Johnny Cash work is American history. He's an American legend. And I use that a lot. I mean, I not only did I work on the American Legends theme for CBS Records for those series of screen prints, but American country music is American folk music. It's American. And I feel like a privileged position here, being an Englishman in the midst of America. And my home is Nashville. I mean, I'm a Nashville photographer. I put it on my tagline is Nashville photography. Nashville, and my tag is Nashville photographer. It's the words I use when I describe myself. I'm a Nashville photographer. Always have. 40 years ago, I introduced myself that way to the LA art directors, and I still believe in Nashville. I believed in that Nashville work should be done here in Nashville. Earlier this year, I did, actually last year, we're New Year now, aren't we?
Yeah.
But I earlier in spring of 25, I did an album cover for an artist, and we did an album. We did the photo session in my studio before the recording session, which is always a good idea before you get tired in the studio. And then I covered the recording sessions, which were at Blackbird, and they were great. And then a few weeks later, he says to me, "Could you send me these pictures and stuff for the album cover?" And I go, "Yeah, but you ought to give me the art director or designer's name so I can send them to him." And he says, "Well, I don't have one yet. We're going to do it down in Houston." I went, No. You don't want to do it in Houston, Texas. You're not going to get it done in time down there. Why don't we do it here in Nashville? I know a production manufacturer here in Nashville. So I represented Nashville once again. And so we worked with a new graphic manufacturing. We did a vinyl LP and a CD package and a booklet for it, an 8-page book. And yes, I'm a Nashville photographer. I bring the work to Nashville. The work was done really well. I mean, he looked at the quality of work and said, "This is some of the best I've ever seen." The quality of the paper and everything.
Yeah.
So I'm a believer in Nashville. I'm a promoter of Nashville, and I hope that as my book is about Nashville, my first book that is, which I'm in progress on, that I mean, I just feel myself as an ongoing Nashville photographer. I think that's it.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to see the book. So people can find your work on alanmesser.com, and they'll see it in the text of all this, but MESSER.
I mean, they can, and you people watching out here on this podcast, I have a website, which is www.alanmesser.com. I have, and maybe we'll post the QR codes if you want on this, because I have QR codes if you want to bring people to that. But that's where you can find me. I'm on Facebook for those who do it, and I'm on Instagram for those who do it there.
Awesome. Yeah, and people can buy, you kind of mentioned this, but people can buy prints from the website.
I have a web gallery, and I encourage people to go to my web gallery and buy directly from me. I get the money. I have instead of splitting it with galleries, and I love my galleries, and you're welcome to go to a gallery. They take a percentage, but I have been doing specials. I have right now, and I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but for January, I have just put up a special for New Year that any print you buy off my website with 26% discount for 2026.
Yeah.
You know, and
very cool.
I had a holiday discount of 20% for December, and there was a $75 dollar discount for someone's 75th birthday, and so on. You know,
fun.
And so watch my website. You know, and you can order anything you see. And if you don't see the picture on the website, send me an email or a message. You know, on socials, and I'll put it up there. You know, and I can. You know, somebody wanted a picture that maybe not up there today, and I'll put it up there, and you can buy it through my web store, you know, quite happily, and I'll custom print it and send it to you.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Alan. I mean, you have an amazing career, and it's very cool to talk to you and hear about this history, and can't wait to see the book and the way you're continuing to represent Nashville in the future.
Yeah, and thank you very much for having me on this podcast. And I wish we had podcasts when I was young. In fact, I want to do a podcast. I want to start. This has encouraged me. I want to do a podcast.
Let's go.
I want to start telling my stories on podcasts.
Absolutely.
Peace and love.
Peace and love. And thank you for building this building.